emergency. Be free to face a life that's ahead of me. On board, I'm the captain, so climb aboard.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
For tomorrow, on every shore, and I'll try, oh Lord, I'll try to carry on. A gathering of angels appeared above my head. They sang to me this song of hope, and this is what they said. They said,
The only thing without a shark is got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eye.
come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me. Come sail away, come sail away, come sail away with me. Come
Where, you son of a...
Welcome to the 70s versus the 80s. This is Wolfman Mike on the mic. And if you ever rode in the back of your parents' station wagon, facing the wrong way with 8 other middle schoolers, as you're going to the triple feature drive-in movie, as your parents blast Yacht Rock, which hasn't even been termed the phrase Yacht Rock yet, then this is the podcast for you. So let's get right into today's episode. We're going to be talking Jaws, of course. Also going to be talking a little bit about Orca. Is it the best knockoff movie ever? Then we're going to go talk some dangerous lawn darts versus cornhole. And then finally, we got a new segment we call Hot Yacht Rock or Yuck Not Rock. So let's get right into it. And as always, I'm joined by Brian, Bry Guy. Did I ask for fries on the side guy? So let's get into it.
So it's summer, Mike. What would you say to maybe taking the 70s versus 80s podcast kind of on a beach vacation?
Yeah, that sounds like with our subject matter today, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Well, what is our subject matter today? Let our wonderful fans know what we're going to talk about today on the 70s versus the 80s podcast.
Okay, I'm calling it Jaws versus Orca. We're starting out with today. It's just, Jaws is a 1975 movie. It's a movie about July 4th. We just kind of went through, it's going to be 50 years old here in a couple years. And, Orca's an unknown movie from 1977, and you might call it a knockoff, and I would call it a knockoff. And so today we're just going to kind of talk about Jaws, the influence it's had on our society, and then how successful the sequels were compared to some of the knockoffs. So Brian, I was going to start you out with what's your first, when do you think, how old were you when you first saw Jaws? What's your first thoughts about it?
Right. So, and we've talked about this before on the podcast. A lot of times, a lot of these movies, especially from the 70s, we first would have saw on network TV. And so sometimes it's an edited version. Obviously, there'd be commercials, so that kind of chops up the flow of watching it. So it was probably sometime, in the summer, maybe it was the ABC movie of the night, and would have seen Jaws, and it brings you in with the kind of the ominous theme, right? That it's very simple, but it's so effective as far as setting the tone of. We've talked also on previous podcasts about building drama, and the Jaws theme is just the simplest, but maybe the best version, way of doing that.
Yeah, the E flat, E sharp, or whatever it is, by John Williams score. And like I've heard people say, he makes you see you don't see the shark. He makes you see it. Just hearing those notes, you see the shark in your mind, even though you're not seeing it on the screen. And you're saying you probably saw it in the ABC movie. I think that makes sense because I think they played it in '79 on the ABC Movie of the Week, and it got like a 52 share when the Super Bowl typically gets around a 31% share. So
Yeah, it was amazing. It's like probably then the first time it was shown on network TV, and it really captured kind of the imagination of the nation, for lack of a better term, there in the mid '70s. It was huge into the pop culture.
and it's still going today. I just recently they re-released it in 3D form. So I saw the night, not to be confused with Jaws 3D, which is the third sequel, but they put the 1975 Jaws came back into theaters in 3D, and I think it was like $8 or something. I took my daughter, and they say, when they always say don't go to a movie that wasn't shot in 3D if they put it in the 3D. This was the best 3D movie I ever seen. I had my hands over my lap trying to keep the water from spilling into my lap the whole movie because of that. And that was because Spielberg put that camera in the glass box and they put it right on the water line, and it works great in 3D. It works great when you watch it on your big screen at home, and yeah, I agree with Quentin Tarantino. I don't know what he says. It's the best. He goes, it might not be the best film ever, but he says it's the best movie ever. I'm not sure what that definition means, but I tend to agree with that. So whatever that means.
Well, we recently, and you can go back and listen to it. We did the in-depth review of The Shining, and when you get these big-time directors, right? They're big-time directors for a reason. They're not just born that way. They don't have good grades in the director scout camp and get picked up. So they're great directors for a reason. And what Spielberg did with Jaws, and like you said, how easily it translated into 3D, how well it was shot, and what Tarantino said, this is like his calling card. Spielberg's made a lot of great films, but the when you think of the reason why Spielberg is Spielberg, it would start with Jaws.
I agree. And then we've all heard the stories of the shark didn't work in salt water, and it was a disaster. And this movie was just like just a disaster. Spielberg wasn't even their first pick as director. The shark kept malfunctioning. It just shows you how greatness can just come out of a disaster. And I think it's got to be the best directing job ever, just because of how great the final product was, considered to how horrible the process was in the making of it.
Yeah, and that goes to the director's eye for what the final product's going to look like, even before it's done. It's kind of like Spielberg's doing the film version of what Michelangelo does, or a great sculptor does when he sees a block of granite, and we all just see a block of granite, but he can see, or he or she can see, what the sculptor's going to look like at the end.
Yeah, and I always try to figure out what this appeal to this movie, why I'm so appealed to this movie. And I think it's the final hour. We get these three men on a boat, and we talked about Quentin Tarantino already. I mean, we know about Quentin Tarantino dialogue, but the dialogue in this movie, and it's, for the most part, it was a PG. I think it was PG when it came out, or PG, because all they had was R and PG. I think
they didn't have the PG-13 was added in the 80s.
Yeah, so this would have been R because of the violence, but the language is for the most part PG, and the dialogue just slays me. You get these three men for the last hour, and when Brody's wife goes running off, when Quint's he's like, "Do you got your I see you got your rubbers on." He makes that joke and stuff, and he's like, "Don't worry, Mrs. Brody, we'll have them home soon." She goes running off. That's the last time there's a woman in the movie. And then we go a whole another hour with just these three guys on the boat. And it's just I think they're the three epitomes of the 70s male. We got the Brody, we all identify with him. He's the blue collar, he's a fish out of water, literally, because he's a big city New York cop, and he's on this tiny little suburban island where everybody kind of knows each other. And then we got Hooper, who's kind of that 1970s marine biologist. He's going to save the world. He's going to change everything. He's got all these big ideas. And then we got Quint, who's who's I want to say he's a World War II vet, but he's as we get that speech, we learn he's like a World War II vet on steroids. I mean, he's got more baggage than anybody, and I just love it. The three men who diametrically oppose each other, and the two are arguing and kind of each trying to get Brody on their side, and he's kind of in the middle of it, and it's just the dialogue just cracks, and the editing and dialogue I love it.
And that's kind of what I feel is missing from more recent attempts at blockbusters. Is it seems that they are great with action and setting these outlandish schemes and settings and conflicts to resolve, but we've kind of lost the dialogue. And maybe that's because when you have in your arsenal great CGI and budgets for huge sets and explosions and stuff like that, you don't have to put as much time into writing the actual screenplay to have the great dialogue. That's one of the things I feel that Jaws, why it stands up today, is you get those, like you said, that three-person kind of tug of war towards the end, which is helping set the drama as much as actually seeing sharks or anything like that. Jaws made today, and I know we like to talk about what if it was made today. Jaws made today would be so much about how they can CGI this shark and everything, whereas then it's more of this is the drama above the water while the shark is lurking underneath, not out of mind but out of camera.
Yeah, and I think we have an example. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Meg, and they're coming out with Meg 2 here. Great CGI special effects, and then like you said, the dialogue, we get the Marvel effect where we just get people wisecracking at the screen. That's the dialogue. Somebody tells a joke that there's no way they would ever have thought a joke that clever at that
right.
And it's,
yeah. That's exactly it. It's a set up, a punchline, 5 minutes of outlandish, impossible action, and then a set up, a punchline, and rinse, lather, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. So I just had a couple questions. The USS Indianapolis speech, where do you think that ranks in speeches or pieces of dialogue in movie history?
So if you would be asking me, like, what's the best speech or whatever in movie history, you almost think of Patton, which I think came out in '70. So that's kind of right at the beginning of what we're looking at. But this is probably on the Mount Rushmore of them, right?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's my favorite. Just the delivery, the whole story about how Robert Shaw, why was I going to call him Robert Stack? He came in drunk, did the first take completely drunk, and then he begged that he could do it. That it was almost unusable, and then he begged that he could come back the next day and did it sober, and then they intercut the two. Sometimes you can see his eyes kind of glossy, and so.
And it's not because it was Kubrick directing it and he was doing the 150th take. It was because he was drunk.
Yeah.
Well, there's lore of people that show up drunk or are high on an acid trip. There's the Green Bay Packer from the first Super Bowl, I think, who was hung over and had to get, because he didn't think he was going to play, and he got thrust into a playing role and ended up being like a star of the first Super Bowl. And then there's the legend of Doc Ellis being high on LSD or tripping on LSD and throwing a no-hitter in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. Well, Robert Shaw here, I mean, he would die 3 years after this movie at the age of 51, with 10 kids with, I can't remember how many different wives, but he's just hard. I mean, he looks like he's in his late 50s in this movie, which works perfect for the role. But
and that wasn't makeup. He just lived hard.
Yeah. And an iconic shot where when they have the first encounter with the shark and they kind of come out on the losing end, and then he's just on the bow of the ship with the sunset behind him, and he just kind of got like a weird smile, here we go back to the Jack Nicholson, Stanley Kubrick smile kind of, and it's just one of my favorite shots in movie history right there. I just love that. Yeah.
Last time I rewatched it, I think I only was able to watch a section of it. You get to a point in your life where you're busy or you don't really have the time to sit down and devote 2 straight hours to a movie. But what struck out to me is, thinking about, we'll be doing this for the 70s versus 80s podcast, is how 70s those beach scenes are with the way the people are dressed, compared to like if you go to the beach today.
Yeah, no one was really dressing for the sex appeal back then, and
No, it was function over form, and now we seem to be, it's more about how you look. Most of the stuff people wear to the beach, you're not going to go want to go in the water in. You're just there to be seen.
yeah, and then some of the '70s, like when Quint squishes the steel can. I don't know if people today get what a big deal that was. Like, and then Hooper does the styrofoam cup right back at him, and I don't
I
think
mean,
we
in
have
the
either of those
seven,
anymore.
yeah,
Styrofoam
in the
works.
70s, those steel cans, you could, probably use them as a jack stand for your vehicle.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
were tough.
We usually talk about, can you remake this now? Can you make it into a 10-part Netflix series? I, no, is the quick answer. I think they're trying to remake a Quint. I think there's a book of Quint story coming out where there's, maybe about the U.S. Indianapolis is kind of his
Yeah,
pre-story. Yeah,
you could almost take the Star Wars approach and do prequels, like leading up to it. Some of these character arcs of what they were doing beforehand. You'd obviously then be using new actors. Um, but the story itself, going to go back to what Tarantino said, where it's a fantastic movie. It's has its drama, has its entertaining, it's well written, it's well shot, it's got a memorable score. You don't want to ruin it by trying to do something. Um, I want to talk about Mel Brooks in an upcoming episode. Maybe even just do some 70s Mel Brooks versus 80 Mel Brooks. But recently Mel Brooks did is like a 6-part series of History of the World Part 2. He had a History of the World Part 1 movie, and most of the online comments I've seen are just like, it's terrible. He shouldn't have done it. He's messing with the classic. And I truly feel that if they were to redo Jaws, even if it was Spielberg doing it in a 6-part thing, that the most of the response would be, you're messing with the classic. It's a money grab, and people wouldn't actually watch it. I watched the Mel Brooks History of the World Part 2, the 6 episodes, and it's one of those things where I think people now are panning it, and in 30 years, what you'll do is you'll just remember just the funny parts of it, because any Mel Brooks movie has its spots that aren't as funny as other spots, and you only remember those funny things when you're looking back at it. And so 20 or 30 years from now, people that watched it now will be like, how great it is compared to what's being done, then. Kind of like we've talked about this about Saturday Night Live multiple times, where everyone thinks the older parts of Saturday Night Live were better because they only remember the good skits. They don't remember the bad skits. And
yeah.
so it always pales in comparison, today's version versus the last one. And I feel that we get that with Jaws. Even if Spielberg did a good job with it, with some kind of six episode streaming thing of Jaws, that it would be panned and just frankly shit upon because you're tampering with the classic.
Yeah, and so that kind of brings us into the next section here. We looked and we've seen that Jaws 2 was below average, and then Jaws 3D and then Jaws Revenge were just god awful because they tried to show the first movie. We didn't see the shark until like an hour into it, and that's kind of what made the tension. And then so in the second, third movies, you had to show them right away because we already know there's a big shark under there. You can't really hide them again. So that's what I was going to try to bring up. I was talking about TV movies. A movie that I saw that I think a movie that really took off once it went to the movie of the week. It was probably ABC or whatever. Was a 1977 movie. So here it is, made 2 years later after Jaws. It was called Orca, the Killer Whale. And now you said you had never seen this, right, Brian?
I've never seen it. I looked into it a little bit. I didn't watch it. But the thing that jumped out to me is in doing a little bit of research about it is that there was a little snippet saying that it is one of the better animal attack movies of the era, which is kind of like being very, very specific to be one of the best of something. It's like, we're one of the top 5 best animal attack movies of 1977. It's like, well, yeah, because they only made 5.
Well, after Jaws, they did come out. They had the grizzly, we had piranha, alligator, which was what were they? They were flushing something down the the New York sewer system's like not steroids, but growth hormone or something, and somebody flushed their alligator
Yeah.
down there and it started consuming that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
And
outside Barry Bonds' house.
yeah, exactly. So, what I remember about Orca is it was Bo Derek's first movie. It had Richard Harris was the star of it. He was in a lot of movies, and then it had Will Sampson, who was Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So it had some legitimate actors in it. Rotten Tomatoes just tanks it. They give a 19%, which is just horrible. IMDb gives it a 5.7 out of 10, which I kind of think is where it belongs. I went back and watched a bunch of the key scenes. I couldn't watch the whole thing because it is a very dark movie. I mean, we have a female whale miscarrying here. It was kind of what starts off the revenge part of the male orca. And it just it's a pretty dark movie. What it has over Jaws is it's showing actual orcas. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no
they did
robots,
have some
no
footage
robots in this. Yeah,
of two orcas. I heard that they were named Yaka and Nepo.
yeah.
One of the things too that I saw in the reviews is there are some people that do love this movie, even though it's got that terrible Rotten Tomatoes thing. But almost all of them are very much that they're sympathetic and sad to the orca, and they're cheering for the orca. Kind of the opposite of Jaws, where everyone's afraid of the great white, and that's the villain. Where a lot of people are sympathetic to the orca in this movie.
Well, the shark has black doll eyes. He's lifeless eyes. Yeah, the shark is, we're gonna cover Halloween coming up here. He's just that, he's just has no emotion, just moves forward and destroys everything. And then in Orca, you are sympathetic to the whale, the orca, because his family's destroyed, and you can see his motivation, and he has the brain to think about it. There's some parts of the movie like where I don't know how the whale knows that ripping up the gas line is going to burn down the whole city, but yeah,
Right. Well, that's why they're like recently. Well, I'm gonna touch on this in a second, but the one other thing I noticed is Dino De Laurentiis is the producer of this movie, and his granddaughter is Gia De Laurentiis, who's a big star on the Food Network. So that's
wow.
like I'm thinking of that as I'm researching. It's like, oh, that name sounds familiar, and I looked it up.
Wow.
Recently, there's been orcas attacking boats, on the coast of Europe and everything. And it's not because they heard we were going to be reviewing this movie. Some marine researchers are thinking they're just being playful and they're bumping into the boats and stuff like that, but they're actually hitting them hard enough to cause damage or even sink them.
Yeah.
And so between orcas sinking our boats and the possibility, right, of a Jaws attack at the beach, I'm thinking, why would we want to take the 70s versus the 80s podcast on a beach vacation? Maybe we should just hang out in our backyard.
Huh, but what would we do when we're there, Brian?
Well, funny you should ask, because the 1970s is famous for having lawn darts. And lawn darts appear that they would be fun, right? It's basically a version of horseshoes. Which is basically a version. Well, I got more about horseshoes later, but it's a game called Coins or something like that. It was just basically throwing discus-like things towards a stake, trying to get the closest. Basically, soldiers being bored and wasting time. Jarts kind of came out, or the lawn darts, and then we had, when I was growing up, they were called Jarts, and my parents would hide them in the rafters of our garage so as kids couldn't get them. But of course, that's just, that's only going to prevent you from getting them until you're tall enough to be able to figure out how to climb into the rafters. And they tried to ban them earlier than when they actually did get banned. And so what happened is instead of selling them in the toy department, the sporting goods stores and stuff like that had to sell them as a sporting good and for adults only. But did you ever play lawn darts or jarts?
Oh, yeah, barefoot and everything.
And they were heavy.
Yes.
It's like I think we pretended to use them as weapons when we were playing pretend war games as young kids. We'd get them out, and then those were like weapons. But between 78 and 87, so prime 70s versus 80s podcast time, there were over 6,700 ER visits for lawn dart injuries, and 3/4 of them were children. So they ended up being banned in 1988. And it was a dad of a girl who got killed who kind of spearheaded that move to get them, because there were deaths.
There were deaths.
Yes.
So if people can't picture these, they were very they had like what, a 3-inch point on them that was heavy. So you didn't throw them like a dart, like you're throwing a dart in a
No,
in a
you
pub.
basically, it had the heavy metal point, and it was heavy. It was probably like 4 pounds, roughly, or something like that. And then it had a plastic fin, so it looked like a space age like fighter jet. And then
Kinda
it,
like the
with
fins on a regular dart, the little
yeah, and
feathered-
so and you'd hold on to it, and you'd basically, you'd almost throw it underhand like you're pitching a horseshoe, and it'd go up, and it's supposed to land in a ring, and you'd get, I think, 3 points if you landed in the ring, and you'd get a point if you were within a dart length of that circle. But they were heavy and pointed, and so they're supposed to then stick in the ground, right? So they don't go bouncing, and then that way, like for scoring. It's not like if you're tossing a beanbag or anything or not a beanbag, but other stuff that could move or roll. But yeah, it ended up, some kids died being hit by these. And
Yeah, they had those little hula hoops that you're supposed to throw it in. I don't think we ever used those. Everybody just kind of threw them back and forth.
right, back and forth, just to throw them, just to see how high you could throw them and how deep you could stick them into the ground.
Yeah.
That's what I remember doing as a kid.
Yep, and then, like I said, if you had bare feet, and the thing is, you kind of threw them underhand. So if you threw them straight up, then there was trouble because they were coming back down in a hurry. But yeah,
Everyone is scattered to the four corners of the yard. Okay, well, let's think of, because people died with lawn darts. So let's think of something that may be a little more safe. So I've got 3 more games that we could talk about. We got bocce ball, we got horseshoes, and we have cornhole. Now, bocce ball and horseshoes kind of have a somewhat similar backstory. Bocce is considered the 3rd most popular sport in the world after soccer, or our European friends call it football, and golf. And recently I've seen an influx, or there's been a pickup in bocce leagues. I think where I live, there's 2 different locations that have built-in permanent bocce courts, like outdoors, and there's leagues. And I know that Halftime Rec in St. Paul, a bar, has bocce courts in their basement. But that's like a full regulation court. Most people play in the backyard, and you throw the little target ball, the pelota or whatever it's called, and then you just, it just basically, you kind of meander around the yard holding a beer in one hand and a bocce ball in the other.
yeah, you need the beer for the counterweight because the bocce
Yes.
is pretty heavy. It's probably like 6 pounds. Yeah, 5-6 pounds. Yeah.
Well, and going back to the bocce story for me, is that one of the 2 times that I illegally drank underage drank in a bar was at Halftime Rec when we were in the basement playing bocce, and I was with a bunch of people a year or 2 older than me, and they're all of age, so then I was able to illegally drink.
So bocce's good for arguing because you have to measure how close and a ball off to the left is considered to a ball to the right, or one's at a 40-degree angle, and you almost got to get out the old antenna and stretch it out.
Right. Yep. I had a measuring device that was like basically it looked like a radio tower antenna thing, or like the Eiffel Tower, and you'd set that over the target ball, and then it had a string, and you could then use the string to measure.
Oh wow!
Because that was better than the tape measure. Because with the tape measure, you're always like, well, you're cheating it, you're doing whatever. So this is like, it's that over the ball, and you bump the target ball a little bit closer to yours so that your measurement comes out. Bocce, as it's been previously, or as it's currently being played, has been tracked back as far as like 260 BC. So it's really old. Another old game, is horseshoes, which came around in the 2nd century. And both these are a game called quoits, which is basically a discus type shaped thing that you would throw to land closest to a target, right? So all this stuff is kind of similar. Like we had the hoop for lawn darts, not your foot, but the hoop for lawn darts. Bocce's, you throw out a target ball, and then everyone tries to get close to this. And now horseshoes, there's a stake, and you throw horseshoes. But the first Horseshoe World Championship wasn't held until 1910 in Bronson, Kansas. So horseshoes was kind of just being played, but it wasn't kind of organized into the sport we know it today in 1910. Now, there's a gentleman named Alan Francis who I will argue, he's from Defiance, Ohio, is, if you're going to talk about people being the greatest of all time because they win championships, like Tom Brady's won 7 championships, he's the greatest of all time. This guy is not only the greatest all time in horseshoes, but I would argue that he's the greatest all time in any sport. He has won, I'm going to let you guess, how many times has Alan Francis won the world championships? And you can't win it until you're after 18 because there's juniors.
So it's once a year. Okay.
Once a year. He can't win it until you're 18. How many times has Alan Francis won the world championship of horseshoes?
Well, since you're asking, it's got to be a crazy number. I'll go 42. I don't know.
That is crazy. You're off, but you're only off by 16. He's won it 26 times.
Wow.
He won it in 89, 93, 95 through 99, 2001, 2003 through 2010, 2012 through 2019, and in 21 and in 22. And so it hasn't been held yet this year, so we'll see if he can add it for the 27. He also won the junior championships before he turned 18 4 different times.
Wow.
So this guy can play horseshoes.
He's putting up numbers bigger than Joey Chestnut, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but how many times has Joey Chestnut won the hot dog thing? Is he gotten to double digits yet, or is he closing in on it?
Is it 16?
Okay, then he's definitely in the double digits. So he's got 10 more years to go. Plus, Alan Francis, he could be adding on again this year, because I don't know what the window is on a horseshoe throwing career, because that was something your uncles would be playing.
Yeah.
And your uncles seemed like they were 100 years old.
Yeah. And yeah, just my uncle's playing horseshoes and bocce. Just a good excuse to drink and argue. I think is what
it pretty much is.
Are.
Well, it's, you got football that you watch in the winter when you drink and argue inside, and then horseshoes and bocce ball allow you to drink and argue outside, take advantage of the good weather. And
jarts can make you lose a couple toes.
Right. So that leaves cornhole. Now, cornhole, we don't shy away from the controversy here at the 70s versus the 80s podcast. And so there is a controversy. It's raging throughout. You've probably heard it. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it here today on the 70s versus 80s podcast, is who invented cornhole? Some people, there's a camp, mostly our European friends, but they say that it was invented in 14th century Germany by a gentleman named Matthias Cooperman. So he was watching kids toss rocks into a nearby groundhog's hole, and he thought, well, if it was safer if he'd make up a bag of corn, because corn was then not necessarily as much of a food grain as it was for weights and other things. And he was a cabinet maker, so he'd be able to make a board, and then he'd cut a hole into it. So that's our German friends or our European friends' argument. Others, so there's a group that say that it's the Black Hawk Indian tribe in Illinois invented it. And Illinois is part of kind of the Corn Belt of Illinois and Iowa and parts of Minnesota. So that checks out. That's certainly a possibility, and they would have had time to play games. Then my favorite is people from Kentucky are really insisting that it was invented by a farmer, a Kentucky farmer. His name was Jebediah McGillicuddy, and he just invented it with materials that he had around his farm. And to me, while his name is fantastically poetic, I'm going to think that that's just more Kentucky urban legend. I'm going to try to leave that one off. And then I heard there was a fourth camp, is mainly the MTV generation. Has someone who they think invented it, and I believe I'm going to let you touch on who that is.
Yeah, Brian, I mean, let's go with the name. Cornhole, I think it had to be invented by the namesake, the great Cornholio.
I am the great Cornholio. You have awakened my bunghole, and now you must pay. The streets will flow with the blood of the non-believers.
I mean, how could it not be?
Yeah, it has to be the Great Cornholio. Because does anyone really know how old the Great Cornholio is? He could have been in 13th century Germany and
Yeah,
invented it, right? Because I've never seen the Cornholio's driver's license to see how old it truly is.
yeah. And he could have invented TP for, never mind. But yeah,
You can put that in as well.
yeah.
I need tippy for my bunghole.
But cornhole is one of those. It's another one of these games that can be played by people of all ages. My late uncle had wanted us to do a family reunion on my dad's side because with them all being military, they all of them had spent time in the military. So my dad's brothers had scattered throughout the country. We have one in Washington State and one in Texas and one in Tennessee. So you didn't see your cousins a lot. So you pushed on a family reunion. So every year at the family reunion, they have a big cornhole game, and then it's a random drawing for partners to help you get to meet people. And so, but that it's being of all ages is, and we ran out of time. But the last reunion's championship game would have been me at age like 51 and my 46-year-old cousin who was my partner against my 80-year-old dad and my 64, I think, year old cousin would have been in the championship game. And so that's like, it's not just the young kids that are going to dominate it. Like if we were out there playing baseball or softball or basketball or any of these ones. So that's why these are great backyard games, is because it can be played by people of all ages. It can be competitive because anytime you get a group of 10 or 12 friends together, there's 4 people that don't want to play anything and just socialize. There's going to be 4 or 5 who will play it just because they want to drink, and then there's going to be the 2 or 3 that are ultra competitive and want to win. And so games like cornhole, horseshoes, bocce fit for all of those groups. Lawn darts, I'd be worried about the competitive group.
What I like about cornhole is, I like all the artistry of the people that make their own boards. Who, they'll have, for the 4th of July, they'll have the stars or the stars versus the stripes.
Yep.
And they, I don't know. I couldn't make one of those boards. I couldn't put that much lacquer on it. I don't know how many times you have to lacquer those things.
That's the problem. We bought one. So my daughter's a University of Minnesota graduate. And so for Christmas one time, for a family gift, we bought, it's a University of Minnesota. So it's got, the go for the Block M and a fun logo on the cornhole boards. And then we bought bags, which are, there's a maroon team and a gold team. And then there's 2 different eras of the Golden Gopher logo, the Goldie, like an old style Goldie and a more modern Goldie. And the first time we played it, so we a brand new board and everything, and you'd hit with the bags on the board and they would just slide off because it's so slick. And so me being a impatient, man, I go and I sand it, and that's helped. But you're actually supposed to there's some kind of substance, resin in those bags that with time will get on there and kind of get it sticky, because you want to have a certain amount of slide. Like you want to be able to, if you lift the board at a certain angle, it's like the bag should be able to slide off, and then when you tilt it back to the right angle, then it's the right amount of where it's a little bit of slide, but not a lot. And then they show it on TV, right? So all these other games, there's not necessarily a professional bocce ball. I don't really see horseshoes on TV. I don't know if they even televise this championship, probably because everyone knows that Alan Francis is going to win. But on ESPN, the first time they televised cornhole on ESPN was in 2017. So it was even before the pandemic. Because I know that during the pandemic, all of a sudden there's cornhole on ESPN half the time. So the championship of bags, called Cobbs, which, cornhole Cobbs, we love the pun, had a larger viewing network than Major League Baseball, which was on 2 networks. The WNBA All-Star Game was on, and the final stage of the Tour de France and the Championship of Bags cornhole tournament got a larger viewing audience than those 4 sporting events. So the people love it. I guess you don't want to just watch it in your backyard. You also, maybe it's so that people like our uncles could drink and argue about it.
All right, I guess we're gonna have to make a 70s versus 80s a set. see who wins out of those 2.
Oh, you 100% could have a 70s board and an 80s board.
Yep.
All right, we'll get our well,
Get your
we'll have to
sander and
send.
get your lacquer, and we'll get
Yep,
going.
we'll have to have our crack staff here at the 70s or the 80s put that together.
All right.
Well, I'm just saying that to me, and maybe that's because I'm from the great Midwest, is that standing in someone's backyard, getting eaten by mosquitoes, having a bonfire, having a good drink in your hand, being surrounded by friends, and playing one of these games is better than getting your leg bit off by a shark or having an orca tip your boat over.
That's
That's a
fair
deep.
enough. I think
That's a deep take.
that's a deep take. Just as long as you don't get hit by a Midwestern tornado, I think you're safe in the middle of the country there.
What if a tornado hit the lawn darts factory? There's just lawn darts swirling around in the tornado.
Oh,
I think
you
we've
got a
got.
movie there.
I think we've got the sequel to the Twister movie.
Sharknado. It would be Jartnado. It's
Jartnado.
Jartnado. Yes. Boy, we got to write that now. We got.
Was his home. The sailor said plainly, "You're a fine girl. What a good wife you would be. But my life, my love, and my lady is the sea." Yeah, Brenda used to watch his eyes when he told his sailor story. She could feel the ocean falling rise. She saw its raging glory.
So, Brian, to stay with today's theme, we were in the water. So I was thinking, what do you like being in the water in a yacht? And what kind of music are you supposed to listen to? You don't want to listen to the Jaws theme music. That'll just freak you the hell out.
And you don't want to play anything that's going to attract orcas to circle your boat, your yacht.
Yeah, so you want to stay again, probably away from the Michael Bublé or whatever would do that. But Kenny G with that, who knows if that thing would bring whales in.
Right.
So we're thinking what we're gonna call this hot yacht rock or Yuck Not Rock. So we each picked out a yacht rock song, and the other one's gonna say either "ooh, that's hot" or "not, yuck not." So hence the name. And so Brian, you go first. What have you picked out for us today?
Wonderfully yacht rocky. Some people call it yacht rock, some call it adult oriented, smooth rock, whatever. The mellow 70s and 80s. I picked Southern Cross by Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
She was making for the trades on the outside and the downhill run to Papa 80 feet of a water line, nicely making way in a noisy bar in Avalon. I tried to call you, but on a midnight watch I realized why twice you ran away. Think about how many times I had fallen. Spirits are using me, larger voices calling. What heaven brought you and me cannot be forgotten. I have been around the world, looking for that woman girl who knows love can endure. And you know what we.
So one of the reasons I picked this is it kind of starts slow, but it's one of those songs that by the end you'll be singing along. Like if you're with a group of friends, you'll be singing along in the car.
What a classic sound it's got to it. I'm going to agree with you, Brian. I say, yeah, this is a hot yacht rock. Very good song. I mean, the singing, the composition. I guess it was after he got divorced. He was talking about going and sailing away. Is what we're going with here.
Clearing your mind, getting your mind clear, just taking a long boat journey. The harmonies. That's I think is a great yacht rock thing when you have the vocal harmonies.
So this was during. I always get confused Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I can't remember which. I think Young came first with the four.
I think,
first.
To be honest, I think it was, and I'm kind of a fan, but I'm not a super fan. I think there was Crosby, Stills, and Nash to begin with, and then Young was in there for the stuff with like Four Dead in Ohio, Tin Soldiers and Nixon's Coming. I can't remember the name of the song. And then I think Neil kind of branched out. He wanted to have a career and a body of work so that he could later on pull it from Spotify. And so they went back to just being Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And David Crosby died either late last year or earlier this year.
Yeah, just recently.
As our musical, the people we listen to from the 70s, 80s are gonna keep passing because it's just time marches on.
All right.
Take the time to get on a boat and take a cruise and clear your head. All right, Mike. So what do you have for me?
So that was a good pick you had there, Brian. This is my song. It's by the world famous Ace. Do you remember Ace, Brian?
I don't.
Well, they had this one song.
How long has this been going on? How long has this been going on? Well, your friends with the fancy persuasion don't admit that it's part of a scheme. But I can't help but have my suspicion, 'cause I ain't quite as dumb as I seem. And you said you was never intending to break up our scene this way. But there ain't any use in pretending it could happen to us any day. How long has this
Yeah, that's one of those good
been
songs.
going on?
It's when you talk about one-hit wonders, do you ever wonder if the guy who coined the term one-hit wonders coined any other terms or not?
All right. I see what you did there. Brian, so the lyrics are, how long has this been going on? So describe to me what you think that song's about.
I think it's about someone really didn't like seventh period English class, and they're just like, how long has this been going on?
How long has this been going on?
No?
Well, you're supposed to get 99% of the people say that song's about like a cheating spouse, adultery or cheating, because it's like, how long has this been going on?
That would have been my next guess. Is that
So that's what
she's at
99%
the
of the
Motel 6
people-
out on the interstate saying, how long has this been going on?
Yeah, that too. So that, how long has this segment been going on? But so that's what I always the first 100 times I heard that song, and then I started digging into it, and it's really not about that. It's about the lead singer Paul Carrack, who I'm going to talk about in a minute. He discovered that his bassist Terry Tex Comer had been secretly working with. They were friends with another group called the Sutherland Brothers, and the Sutherland Brothers were more accomplished, more popular at the time. So they were kind of opening up for them. And then the Sutherland Brothers decided that they wanted this Terry Tex Corner to be their bassist. And so when the lead singer Paul Carrack found out about it, he wrote this song, and the lyrics are, all your friends with their fancy persuasions. You're like, that doesn't really make sense for an adultery song or whatever.
No.
So it's really about that. And the good news is that the bassist ended up staying with Ace, and then Ace became the bigger group because they made this song about the other group trying to steal their bassist. So they got the last laugh. Yeah.
They did. That part right there is making me think twice, because Mark Maron's offered for me to be on his podcast, and I was going to jump ship. But now that you mentioned that, I think I'm going to stay here. I think I'm going to stay here on the 70s versus the 80s podcast.
So we're kind of making fun. Ace is a one-hit wonder, but that Paul Carrack, he went on to be quite the singer. Do you remember this song?
I know I will. Tempted by the fruit of another. Tempted, but the truth is discovered. What's been going on? And now that you have gone, there's no other. Tempted by the fruit of
So
Yes.
did you know that was the? I guess you can kind of hear it. He kind of's got the same tone as the Ace singer.
Right. Sometimes you can, when a vocalist has changed groups or something, or just a new song, right? And there's just something about a vocalist, because it's kind of a unique signature to each individual vocalist, at least until the auto-tune era, where someone would be like, you'd be like, oh, that sounds like the guy from Ace, and But I didn't listen to these enough. This is just kind of the background music, right, of our 70s and 80s collective.
Paul Carrick wasn't done there with Ace and Squeeze. He went on to this, and to find this sound clip, I had to listen to the song. I hate this song. Mike and the Mechanics, The Living Years, this sounds like him a little too.
And don't give in, you may just be okay. Say it loud. Say it clear. You can listen as well as you hear. Because it's too late. It's too late.
And ooh, I had to listen to that. To find that clip, I had to listen to that song. I do not like that song. I like the vocal performance,
Right.
And I guess I can kind of hear he's the same guy in all three clips.
Right, but at what point during the song, as you're listening for that clip, did you be like, how long has this been going on?
How long has this been going on?
Boom, boom. So yeah, I don't have my drum effects or anything.
I was gonna say I'm trying to now see if we can steer it to a Phil Collins drum effect bit, but I'm
That's
sure
what
you'll be
I'll
able
have
to
to
figure
do.
out a spot to put that in.
Oh, wait. Brian, that joke deserves a drum roll. I wonder if I have one here. Oh, here's one. Has Phil fallen down again?
Yeah,
You
we
just-
need to get a Life Alert sponsorship or for Phil.
Every time we play that sound effect, Life Alert should give us a fallen and I can't get up type thing. So that's what. So Brian, you never answered us. So how long is that a hot yacht rock or is that a yuck that sucks?
No, it's a hot yacht rock. It's one of those things that makes you listen, and like you said, sometimes you have to listen to it multiple times to get the true meaning, and that's sometimes the mark of a fun one-hit wonder song, or even just a yacht rock song, right? It's something that's you can listen to it, and there's some that listen to it because it makes you feel like you're grooving, or some of it's like you like the vocal harmonies, and sometimes it's like you're trying to find the hidden message in it.
Yeah, and I like that one because it's just one of the more yacht rock songs. It couldn't be any other genre. It's just dripping in it. So
That's the 70s and 80s were until the hair metal era and the hip hop era started, and after kind of the end of the big blues rock and things that was the majority of our 70s and 80s listening was yacht rock.
How long has this been going on?
how long has this been going on? It's been going on that long because we are out of here, folks. And I just wanted to thank everybody for us at the 70s versus the 80s for all the great support. The numbers have been crazy lately. The $6 Million Man episode was our biggest ever, and I just like to thank everybody for that. And if you want to reach out to us and give us some ideas about what episodes you want to hear, you can reach out to us at Facebook, Twitter, or I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You just click on it. It's called SpeakPipe, and you just speak into it, and you might hear your voicemail on the next episode. So thank you so much, and happy yacht rocking, everybody.
Oh, the candles can do miracles. Just